With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Nun Aleph. We left off on Daf Nun Amid Beis. We have on the top of the Amid the inquiry, the boya of Rabbi Elazar. We are learning about the par, the bull that the Kohen Gadol has to buy out of his pocket. And it's used to bring atonement to him and also to the other Kohanim. We want to understand how we classify this bull. Now, firstly, we have a machloikas tanoim b'chlal, whether we consider this to be a korban yachid, or on the other side, either a korban sibur or a korban of shutfim. Rabbi Elazar's boya is according to those who opine that the par has the status of a korban yachid, and that is certainly shitas Rabbi Meir, as we had a Mishnah Brais on Daf Nun Amud Aleph. So according to that opinion, even it being a korban yachid also leaves room for, is it mamash a korban yachid? And therefore one will be able to use it as the source of a temura, to make a substitution korban, which is really something that one may not do. A temura can only come from a korban yachid. A korban of shutfim, a korban sibur can never be used to make a temura, and if one made such a declaration, it b'chlal won't be effective. Or even according to the opinion that holds that the part of Yom Kippurim is considered a korban yachid, nevertheless, it's not mamash a korban yachid, and it can be used as the source of a temura. This is the boya of Rabbi Elazar. Now we're going to really spend we're going to continue. We left off on Daf Nun Amid Beis. We're going to review the Braisa. We're going to go back and forth, and ultimately we will not be able to come to a resolution, not from the Braisa, nor from other approaches to the boya of Rabbi Elazar. Now, because of this conversation, we're going to go into Pesach Sheni. We're going to have the Machloikes Tanoim. Pesach Sheni certainly overrides Shabbos. Question will be whether Pesach Sheni also overrides Tumah, which is very interesting because you think about it. Why didn't you do Pesach Rishon? Well, one of the reasons that the Torah writes two reasons, is a person was Tamei. So imagine there are those who hold that Eina Chanami, if a person is Tamei, right, and it's only a minority of the community, they are deferred to Pesach Sheni. But if they are still Tamei, or they became Tamei again on Pesach for Pesach Sheni, then they should finally bring it. Or other Tanoim hold that of course not. If the reason why you didn't bring Pesach Rishon is because you were Tamei, so if Tumah deferred you, so then Tumah again should take away your ability to bring the Pesach Sheni. And on Daf Nun Aleph Amid Beis, we're going to continue with the Seder of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. We are already speaking about him holding, already before, the Kaf, the Machta, and we're going to describe the path that the Kohen Gadol uses to get into the Kodesh Kachim. And actually we're going to have a three-way Machloikes Tanoim, describing exactly how did he walk through the Heichel, and that's also going to introduce the curtain that we had in the Mishkan that separated Bein HaKodesh or Bein HaKodesh Kachim. In Bayis Rishon we have what we call the Amatraxin, which was a very thick wall, an Amma thick wall. Well, actually in the Beis HaMikdash, most of the walls were much thicker, but there was an Amma thick wall that separated the Kodesh to the Kodesh Kachim. In Bayis Sheni there wasn't the Amma thick wall, but in its place there were two curtains. We're going to speak out the Machloikas Rishonim Pashit, how to interpret the word Traxin. What does it mean? Why didn't they have the wall, at least according to some Tanoim, in Bayis Sheni, and Chevra much more. So let's go back to Daf Nun Amid Beis. I think we should start around 11 lines from the bottom of the Amid and just to verbally speak out like this. Again, we have the boy of Rabbi Elazar. L'divrei ha'oimer, that the partial Yom Kippurim is a korban yachid. Oisa temura or eina oisa temura. So the Gemara attempted to resolve it from a Braisa that uses this relatively common expression that chomer bazevach mi batfura, that there's a greater element of stringency in a korban versus a temura, and on the other hand there's a chomer batmura mi bazevach. And the premise of the proof is that this Braisa is speaking actually about a specific zevach that we find by a zevach, and I'm just quoting part of the Braisa, that it's doicher Shabbos and Tumah. A zevach is a korban from which you can affect a truma. Mashe enkein, if you have a temura is not doicher Shabbos, and and Tuma, and just to make it clear that certain Temuras are B'chlal not brought. L'mashal, a Temura from a Chatas is B'chlal not brought. Temura from an Oila is brought, even though it was born, so to say, out of a violation. One should never make a Temura. But even if it's a Temuras Oila, which it will be brought on the Mizbeach, it's never going to be Doicha Shabbos or Tuma. And the Temura itself can never be used as the source of yet another Temura. This is just part of the Braisa. So based on the premise that we're speaking about a specific carbon, the Gemara wants to understand which carbon is this Braisa referring to. A general carbon Yachid won't be Doicha Shabbos and Tuma. A carbon Sibur can never be used to make a Temura. So is there a Zevach, a specific Zevach that both has these qualities? Yes, but that must be, that was the Gemara's proof, the par. Exactly, that this Braisa also follows the view that we classify the par of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur as a Karban Yachid, and we know that it's Doicha Shabbos and Tuma. It's brought on Yom Kippur, and it's Doicha Tuma. It has to be brought on that day. There's a B'mayadoi, and yes, it can make a Tumura. That will be a great proof, a resolution to the Baya of Rebbe Lazar. So, 11 lines from the bottom of the Amid. So, Amar Rab Sheshes, there is no proof. I accept that the Braisa might be referring to a specific Zevach, contrasting a carbon versus a Tmura. However, who says the Braisa is referring to the par of the Kohen Gadol? Maybe Be'eloi Shel Aharon. Now there is a carbon oila that is a ram that Aaron brings on Yom Kippur, and that carbon oila, that ram, that ayil is not brought for anyone else. It's certainly more a carbon yachid. It's also Doicha Shabbos and Tuma, because it has to be brought on Yom Kippur. That's Gavaldik. And if that is the Zevach that the Braisa is referring to, then coming back, we don't have any solution to Rabbi Lazar. Because even though the pot is bought out of pocket, but it's certainly also brought to Echav HaKayanim, Am Kedeshecha. V'haraya, the Viduy Sheno is specifically about, not only about him, but about all the other Kohanim. So the question remains open. And now the Gemara continues, and Hachi Name Mistabra, that the Zevach that the Braisa is referring to is not to the par, but yes to the Ayil, because the Isal Kadaitach, that it is referring to the par. The Braisa in the first clause, when it's speaking about Choymer Bazevach Mi Batvura, concludes, Masha Enkin Betmura. Now that doesn't make sense, because it's mashma enkein betmura, that the tmura from this zevach doesn't override Shabbos and Tuma and cannot be used to make yet another tmura. That's not correct. Well, it's correct, but the inference is not correct, because by saying that the tmura doesn't override Shabbos and Tuma implies that if it is not, there's no Tuma and it's on a weekday, then it will be brought. Well, the tmura, if you can make a tmura from the par, which is a chatos, a tmuras chatos, is not even brought on the weekday. Tmura, the par, only Shabbos v'tumah u'doleidachya, which implies v'abachoil mikriv karva. No, ha'tmuras chatos v'tmuras chatos l'misla azla. And therefore is a raya that the Braisa is certainly not speaking about a par. The Braisa is only speaking about an ayol. The ayol is an oila, and yes, tmuras oila is brought, not Shabbos, not betuma. Cannot be used to make another temura, but it will be brought. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, well, even though you're right by saying that this Braisa cannot be used as a conclusive proof resolving the boy of Rabbi Lazar, because it might be speaking about an ayol, but don't tell me that it must be speaking about an ayol, because maybe, perhaps, le'olam, that the Braisa is referring to the paroi. But when it says Mashe Enkein Betmura, it's not speaking about the Tmura of this par. Umay Tmura, Shem Tmura. In other words, generally, a Tmura won't override Shabbos and Tuma. Generally, there are Tmuras that are brought, which is a Tmura of an Oila, which is a Tmura of a Shlamim. In other words, the Mashe Enkein Tmura is not speaking about a specific type of Tmura, but it's speaking about the general category of Tmura. Asks the Gemara, how can you teach that meaning, if the Braisa is not speaking about any specific carbon? So why did you, Bechlal, bring this Braisa at least to attempt to prove, to resolve the boy of Rabbi Lazar? Maybe the Braisa, when it says Zevach, it also doesn't speak about a specific Zevach. The Braisa is only speaking about the general category of the Zevach. In other words, how did we come to say, that a par can make a Temura? because we're trying to figure out which zevach, on one hand, is doiches Shabbos and Tumah, and on the other hand, can make a Temura. And the general problem is that zvachim, as a rule with many exceptions, but if it's a yachid, it's not doiches Shabbos and Tumah. So it's a tzibur, but if it's a tzibur, it doesn't make a Temura. You chop the problem here. And therefore we came to say, the zevach is the par, or now the ayil. Why are you b'chlal saying that? Why can't you understand the Brais is contrasting the general category of a zevach versus the general category of a Temura, and it should never have been brought. So the Gemara says, no. Shem zevach loikatani. This Braisa, when it's speaking about zevach, is not speaking about the general category of a korban, and it is speaking about the general category of a Temura. Now, Chavra, all of this just means that at the end of the day, this Braisa was taka used as a attempted proof, because we are speaking about a specific zevach, but it won't be an ultimate proof because it could be a par, it can be the ayil. But let's first prove why the Braisa, when it speaks about the zevach, unlike the Temura, it's not speaking about the general category, mimai, because midiktani, in the second clause of the Braisa, that there is a chomer mibat Temura. That what is more stringent? What's the more stringent element that we find by a Temura? Shatemura chala al balmum kavua. That even if the animal prior to being consecrated already has a permanent blemish, and if you were to consecrate it as a zevach, it would never be imbued with any kedushas haguf. True, it would have kedushas mamain, but therefore, when you are going to be poida it, it's going to go out fully l'chulin. A Temura, even if it had before your sinful declaration, let this animal be the Temura, it had a balmum. It does get imbued with kedushas haguf. Now it has to be redeemed, but since it had kedushas haguf, ve'eino yoytze l'chulin, it never fully goes out l'chulin, meaning you will never be allowed to share it, you will never be allowed to work with it nekuda. Now ve'is al kadaitach, that this braisa my zevach is shem zevach, is speaking about the general category of zevach. So then the contrast is not true, because we do find certain karbanos that are not temuras, that are zvachim, that will imbue an animal with kedushas haguf, even though it has a mum, which will be daf nun aleph v'ha'ika, either a b'chor, the b'chor, it's taka going to become going to be given to the kohen, but it has kedusha, not kedushas mamain, kedushas haguf. Similarly, meiser behema, whichever 10th animal leaves the pen becomes consecrated with kedushas meiser behema, even though again it's not going to be bored on the mizbeach, but it's beyond kedushas mamin. The chalin al bamum kavua, and therefore ve'ena yoytzen l'chulin legazos uleyavet. So the only way to interpret the Braisa properly is when the Braisa speaks about zevach, shem zevach loikatani. The Braisa is not speaking about the general category of zvachim. The Braisa is saying like this, Chavra, that there is a specific type of zevach that has a greater stringency than the general category of Temura. Yachap, that's how you have to learn the Braisa. There is a specific type of zevach that has a chumrah, that has a certain element of stringency more than the klal, than the general category of Temura. Now, what zevach is the Braisa talking about? Again, if the only option would have been par, then this Braisa taka would have been a resolution to the baya of Rabbi Lazar, but think about it counters, it could be an ayil. Now, why would the Braisa not be consistent? Why is it that when we speak about the Temura, we're speaking about the general category? Why is it that by the Zevach we have to be speaking about a specific? Umayshna Temura explains the Gemara, it makes sense. Because Shem Temura Achasi. Shem Temura Achasi means that all of the Temuras share or are subject to the same set of rules. All Zvachim are not subject to the same set of rules. Ve'haraya zevach, just for example, in other words, we're speaking about the rules of the Braisa. So when you speak about that a Temura can never be owned by a tzibur, that's correct. That's a general. That's correct. A Temura, a tzibur, right, can never make. It can be owned by a Temura. It can never be brought on Shabbos or on Tumah. A Temura always could be made on a Balmum, not to be offered on the Mizbech, but it's going to be effective. In other words, Taka, the rules that this Braisa is referring to are consistent by all of the Temuras. The rules that this Braisa is speaking about a Zevach is not consistent by all the Zvachim. I'm not speaking about all of the rules of Karbanis. Of course, all the rules of Temurah are not consistent. Temurah's Chatas is Lemisa Azla. Temurah's Ayla is brought. We're speaking about this, what this Braisa is focusing on. And all the rules of Zvachim are not consistent because this Braisa is speaking about the concept that if an animal is a Balmum prior to being consecrated, and this Braisa says that it's not Chal, there's no Kedushas Haguf by Zvachim, that is not true by all the Zvachim, like we just mentioned. That B'choira and Meiser are Chal, there is Kedushas Haguf, even though the animal has a mum. Zevach Ika B'chor ve'Ika Mais. Okay, says the Gemara Vayter, they have 4 lines on the top of the Amid, Ulerab Sheishes, based on the Braisa speaking about a specific Zevach. And the only way that we knock out the Braisa of being approved to Rabbi Elazar is by saying that the Braisa is not speaking about the par, or at least perhaps not. But what was the alternative that Rab Sheshes offered? The ayil, which is a nice alternative. Asks the Gemara, I have a better alternative. Let's not forget that the Braisa uses the word Zevach. You know where we find the word Zevach used in the Torah concerning Benegeya, a specific carbon? Pesach. Zevach Pesach. So asks the Gemara, Ule Rab Sheshes, why not loikma bePesach? Again, why is Pesach better than an ayil? Because the Torah calls Pesach Zevach Pesach. And it fits, because again, what's the stringency? That Pesach is Doiche Shabbos and Doiche Tumah, at least when it's Roif Tzibur. A Pesach could be used for a Temurah. Right? How do we know that a Pesach couldn't be used for a Temurah? Didn't we just say that even if you only have partners owning a carbon, it can never be the source of a Temurah? True. But you could have a Pesach that's only owned by one person. Now this takes us back to a Machlekes Tanaim that we had in Pesachim. Not everyone subscribes to that. Because there could be the carbon Yachadu. So that's exactly the answer. Says the Gemara, the reason why Rab Sheshes did not give this option is because he will subscribe like those Tanoim who hold that Ein Shoich Lenes HaPesach Al HaYachid ever. We never allow for a Pesach to be owned by a Yachid. So when the Braisa says, so such a Pesach can never be a source for a Temurah. It cannot be the specific Zevach that the Braisa is referring to. Even Noikma B'Pesach Sheni, even those who hold that a Pesach Rishon may not be owned by one, a Pesach Sheni could be owned and brought by one Yachid, and therefore it will be able to be used for a Temurah. So answers the Gemara, no, that's also not a solution. Because Midachi Tuma. We're going to see in a few lines that there was a Machlekes Tanoim. The Ar Tanoim, and the Gemara knows this, that hold that Pesach Sheni does override Tumah. But other Tanoim don't. And as a klal, we always prefer, when we read a Tana, which was the Braisa that we learned on Daf Nun Amud Beis, that doesn't have any name attributed to it, we would prefer for it to go L'Kula Alma. And when the Braisa is saying that there is a Zevach that's Doiche Tumah, if it would have been referring to Pesach Sheni, well, that's already a Machlekes Tanoim. We want to avoid that. And therefore, Rab Shesh's solution, his approach, which will make the Braisa a non-proof to Rabbi Elazar, is perfect by saying it's referring to the ayil of Yom Kippur, which L'Kula Alma is Doiche Tumah. Pesach Sheni is not L'Kula Alma Doiche Tumah. Okay. Amalei Rafuna Berei Rabbi Yeshua to Rava. And the Mishnah Braisa that we learned in Daf Nun Amud Aleph, there was the Tanakama. Then Rav Meir challenged the Tanakama. That was the Tanakama that's saying, why is it that certain korbanos are doiche Shabbos and Tumah and certain are not? So the Tanakama says, I'll tell you, a carbon Yachid is not doiche Shabbos, not doiche Tumah. Carbon Sibur is. So there was a rebuttal from Rav Meir, and then there was a rebuttal from Rabbi Yaakov. So why is it that we learned the Tana, and this Tana is referring to Rav Meir, the ratio of what we learned on Nun Amud Aleph, Ma'ishna Pesach to Karelei Carbon Yachid. Well, and you can classify this as a carbon sibur, because it's taken, like we just said, according to some, it may never be owned by one individual. It's brought when everyone is together. But still, if that is called a carbon yachid, so why is it that when Rabbi Yaakov challenged the Tanakama and he used Chagiga as one of the proofs for his rebuttal, he called a Chagiga a carbon sibur? It doesn't make sense. And the Gemara explains its challenge. If the reason why you're calling a Chagiga, guys, Chagiga, really there are two Chagigas. Remember, from Pesach, there is the Chagiga that is called Simcha. No, there's a mitzvah v'samachta b'chagecha ve'ein simcha ela b'basar ve'ela b'yayin. So you have to have basar. You bring a shlamim, a chagiga. But then there is on the first day of Yontiv. Ideally, you have to bring an oilas re'iyah and a shalmei chagiga. So let's go to that. Now every individual has to bring it. Every individual has to bring it. Why would you call it a tzibur? Mishum, that the reason why Rabbi Yaakov calls the chagiga a karban tzibur. Because the asi bichinufia, because it's brought in the gathering. In other words, you have all of the Yidden assembled on the first day of Yom Tiv. So even though you own it, but since it's brought only when everyone is assembled, that will classify it, at least here, as a karban sibur. Well, if that's the case, Pesach should also be called a karban sibur because it's also brought bichinufia in the assemblage and the gathering of the Yidden. Says the Gemara, true, Pesach Rishon might have been called a karban sibur, but since this Braisa or Mishnah is not speaking about which Pesach, it's referring to both Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni is dafke not brought b'chinufya. Fakert, if Roiv of the Tzibur would have been Tamei, they would have brought Pesach Rishon. The whole concept of a Pesach Sheni is to give an opportunity to individuals to make up for that which they didn't do prior. Ika Pesach Sheni, that the loy is a b'chinufya. So Amalei, hold on. If Rav Meir, right, on Daf Nun Amud Aleph, is referring to Pesach Sheni, and he's using that as a proof, right? Im Kain, Take, Yehei Doiche, Es Shabbos, Ve'es Tuma. So he tells him, and in reality it doesn't. That's the premise of the question. So the Gemara says, no, that this Tana holds that Take in. It is Doiche. It's Doiche, not only Shabbos, that's for sure, it's even Doiche Tuma. And now we're going to quote the Machlekes Tanoim. And Keman the Amar Dochi, the Tanya Pesach Sheni Doiches Shabbos. Everyone holds that it's Doiches Shabbos. However, the Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda holds Ve'enu Doiches Atuma. I'm sorry, Tanakama holds not Doiches Atuma. Rabbi Yehuda says Af Doiches Atuma. Explains the Gemara what's underlining this machlokes. My Tama the Tanakama Amalach. He says, I don't understand. If Tuma would be a non-problem, then this Yid would have brought Pesach Rishon. Mepnei Tuma the Chisoi. Because of Tuma, he was not allowed to bring Pesach. So you're telling me that V'yaseh B'Tuma, so he should bring it B'Pesach Sheni, like if he's anyways bringing it B'Tuma, look back, then he should have brought Pesach Rishon. It doesn't make sense. However, Rabbi Yehuda Armalach, first of all, by the fact that it says in Parshas Ba'aloischa Amakra that Pesach Sheni should be made, Kechol Chukas HaPesach Yasa Oisoi. And my friends, we know that there are times that Pesach Rishon is brought B'Tuma, not always, sometimes, and that is when Roiv Tzibur Ar Tamei. So first of all, to make Pesach Sheni like Pesach Rishon, it will be more similar, if it will also share this character trait, not in details, but in concept, that there is Pesach Sheni that is brought B'Tuma. But Tanakama had a logic. He says, if you're anyways going to bring it B'Tuma, why didn't he bring Pesach Rishon? Well, the answer is, of course we prefer for you to bring it B'Tara. So if you don't have the Roiv Tzibur Tamei, you're just a Yachid, then don't bring Pesach Rishon, for you to have the possibility of bringing it B'Tara. But if at the end of the day it came out that before Pesach Sheni you became Tamei again, or for whatever reason you didn't get rid of the old Tuma, then bring it V'afilu B'Tuma. Like Pesach Rishon means also that sometimes it should be brought B'Tuma. HaToira hechazira olav lasas B'Tara. So in other words, why didn't you bring Pesach Rishon? Because the Torah lachatchila would prefer for you to bring it B'Tara. But lo yizacha yasenu B'Tuma. Okay. Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis. Chevra, we are back. All of this now is that the Braisa that we brought on Daf Nun Amud Beis, that's speaking about a specific zevach, is lav dafka speaking about the par. For you to bring a raya that the par could affect the tmura. So we're back to the boya of Rabbi Lazar. So again, many hold on Daf Nun Amud Aleph that the par of the Kohen Gadol of Yom Kippur, right, is not a karban yachid. It's a karban shel shutvim. It might even be the way it was worded by Rav Amram, a karban shel tzibur, even though he brought it out of pocket, but he gives it to the other kohanim. V'haraya, they get kapara from it. Rabbi Elazar is saying that Rav Meir clearly called the par, and we had the Braisa, not par Helam Do. He called the par a Yachid. He called it a par, a Korban Yachid. Well, is it Mamish a Yachid? Can it be used to make a Tmura or not? That was the boy. So that's unresolved yet. So again, we're going to try to give a response to solve this boy. The Teipu clay. Why don't we resolve the boy based on the fact that in the portion of Achrei Mois, Chevra, the Torah writes 3 times that this par, that this bull, belongs to him. The first time the Torah writes Asher Loi, it must be his own. Amar Achmana. So from that we learn Mishaloi Humevi. That's din number 1. The time, the Shaloi Humevi, and as we'll see in a moment, from the din that it's his, L'chaura, it should mamish be a Korban Yachid. Certainly L'divrei Ha'omer. The Tanya Asher Loi. When the Torah wrote the first time Asher Loi, from that we learned Mishaloi Humevi v'le Mishal Tzibur. However, says the Braisa, had the Torah only wrote once Asher Loi, I might have thought Yachol Lo Yavi Mishal Tzibur, that it may not be bought from Tzibur funds, and the reason for that would be because She'ein had Tzibur Mischaprim Boy. So the Asher Loi is only, it's not coming out of the Trumas Halishka. It's not coming out of the Shkolim. Avol Yavi Mishal Echav HaKoyanim, but at least let the other Koyanim also pay for it because Shaharei Echav HaKoyanim is Chaprim Boy. So to make that clear, that that's not the case, the Torah writes a second time in the portion of Achrei Mois. Again, Asher Loi, taka out of his pocket. Still the Braisa continues. Yachol Yavi, maybe the Asher Loi is only that they should not participate in its buying. They don't give any money for it. That's a lechatchila dikadin. But v'im hevi, but if the Kohen Gadol got money from them as well, then b'di'evet it's kosher. And indeed, that is this unique rule of kachim, that even when God says that something should happen or something should not happen, if the Torah does not repeat it, it means it's not essential, it's only lechatchila or only a mitzvah, but not ma'akev. So that's why Talmud Loimer Shuv a third time, Asher Loi. In other words, the second Asher Loi is not even a repetition, because the first Asher Loi is not from the Tzibur funds. The second Asher Loi is not even from the Kohanim. The third Asher Loi is that not even from the Kohanim is essential. Shana HaKosav Olav La'akev. Okay. So it asks the Yomara, when you learn such a Braisa and you see how it's so essential that no financial participation may come from anyone else, it must be mamish his, the Kohen Gadol's. So come on, that's a Korban Yachid. So the Gemara says, no, ula taimeich. I don't understand. You taka think that it only belongs to him? That Echav HaKoyanim, all of the other Kohanim, ilav de konu bigavei, if they would not have any type of kinyan in it, not that they're paying for it, but if they have no shaykhs to it, guys, there's a rule, a korban only affects kapara for its owner. I mean, that's the whole premise of the whole shkolim that we learned. I want to get a kapara from the karbanei sibur, those who bring kapara, I have to participate with it financially. If you have no skin in the game, then it's not going to be mechaper for you. Now, it doesn't always mean you have to pay for it. It could mean that you pay for it and you bequeath it to me, but I have to, at the end of the day, have some sort of ownership in it. So again, that's why just because the money part of it must come only from the Kohen Gadol li'ikuva, it doesn't respond to the boya of Rabbi Lazar. Elo shani begaza di Aaron, this type of ownership of the bull, we're speaking about the bull, is different from other karbanos. Normally the rule is, if you want to own it, buy it. Here there's a rule that only the Kohen Gadol should buy it, but the afkerei rachmana legabe echav ha'kohanim. The afkerei means not that they take it away from the Kohen Gadol, but the Kohanim become some sort of partners in it. So Eibazoi, Hachinami, Gabetmura, Nami, Shani Begaza di Aaron, this type of ownership, even though it only was bought out of pocket from the Kohen Gadol, the afkerei rachmana gabe echav ha'kohanim. Now, don't forget just to say the words that we had still on Nun Amid Beis, a Gavaldik concept, that one still might look at it that Etaka fully belongs to the Kohen Gadol. The concept of the Afkerei means that there's this, remember this floating kapara that we spoke about. that the moment the Kohen Gadol becomes completely atoned for his failings, then automatically all the other Kohanim become atoned as well. It's as if the atonement of the Echav HaKoyanim are contingent on the Madrega of the Kohen Gadol. When the Kohen Gadol gets better, automatically that brings it. Could be. If that would be the pshat, then it's taka kohen yachid, a carbon yachid completely, l'divrei ha'emet, and then it can affect the tamura. Or that's the boya. Maybe that the Torah was mafkid it, and we're not going to call it like Rava says. You can't call it a carbon sibur, okay, but call it a carbon of shutfim. In other words, it's a carbon yachid and a carbon shutfim at the same time, and therefore it cannot affect the tamura. So the boya of Rabbi Lazar remains unresolved. Gavaldik. Chavra, we're coming back to Easy Street. It's Pashat. Yoma is beautiful. We are going to continue to learn the Pashat, the Seder of the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Giving a heads up, tomorrow, finally, Daf Nud Beis is when we're going to enter the Holy of Holies. That's beautiful. But we're not there yet. The last thing we mentioned was how the Kohen Gadol now has in his right hand, Dafka, the machta of the coals. Right, remember the golden, the rose gold, the red gold with the long handle, the 3 kav of coals in the right hand, because either it was heavier or because simply by the fact that it was hot, we gave the stronger hand the job of holding it. In the left hand of the Kohen Gadol, you have the kaf. He is now going to the Holy of Holies, but he has to go through the ulam and the heichal. And we're not going to focus at all at the ulam, but yes, we're going to focus on the path that he took through the heichal to get into the Holy of Holies. Says the Mishnah. Ho yamahalach beheichal, with the macht on the kaf. At shemagia lebein shtei haparoiches. Here we are introducing. Where is Kevan? Where is Reb Dani? Let's get some pictures up. So what do we have over here? The Mishnah is saying clearly that B'Bizman Bayesheni, you had two curtains separating the Kodesh from the Kodesh Kachim. Now let me just speak out what we will learn in the Gemara in a moment. In the Mishkan, clearly there was a paroiches, there was one curtain that separated between the Heichal, which is also known as the Kodesh. In the Heichal, we had in the middle the Mizbeach, we learned about that. We learned that we had on the right, and we have to get used to just the directions, that we're going from east to west. So right also means to the north. That if you would look to the north, you would see the Shulchan. The Shulchan was in the Tzafon. If you look to the left, you would see the Menorah. Bisman Bayis Rishoin, we're going to even review this a little bit today, just to remember that Shlomo HaMelech B'Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, added an additional 10 shulchanos and an additional 10 menorahs. And let's not forget, my friends, that we already learned the machlokes, whether they were placed, all of these additional shulchanos and menorahs, whether they were placed east-west or north-south. If they were placed north-south, they were dafka placed in 2 columns, not in 1 column. But they went mamish, very good, from wall to very good. That's a great picture, from wall to wall. So, and the picture that we have up over here, we don't yet see the 10 shulchanos. We don't see that at all. This shita follows the Tana that holds that the menorah was placed north-south. Everything that we're saying here is not lekula alma. But what's very important is like this: that Bizman Bayesheni, that we didn't have, according to some Tanoim, we had 2 curtains. We did not have a wall. Lekula alma, there was no wall. But there is a machlokes Tanoim whether there was 1 or 2 curtains. Now you will notice that the curtain through which you entered the Holy of Holies, the curtain closest to the Kodesh Kachim, had its opening on the northern side. No one debates that. According to the Tanoim that hold that there was only 1 curtain, even Bizman Bayesheni, then the opening was on the northern part. According to the other Tanoim who hold that Bizman Bayesheni there was a double curtain, so then, the innermost curtain had the opening on the north, but the outermost curtain, the curtain through which the Kohen Gadol would have to go through first, the opening was dafka on the south. Now, another thing to speak out that's not in this picture. Bizman Bayis Rishon, there was a wall. The wall was in the place of these 2 curtains. It was 1 amma thick wall. Bizman Bayesheni, they couldn't build a wall for a technical reason. Like we mentioned before, if you can see the walls inside the Heichal, the walls of the building were really very thick. They were 5 amas thick. Remember, we learned this a lot in Midrash. The wall in Bayis Rishon that separated between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodshim was 1 amma thick. How tall was the Bayis Rishon? The ceiling was 30 amas above the ground. So when people, we don't need this picture, when people would build a wall, think about it, the taller the wall, the stronger it has to be. Bizman Bayesheni, the ceiling was 40 amas tall. This is even before Hurdas came and refurbished and made the Bayesheni much taller. That additional 10 amas, so to say, checkmated the wall, because to make a wall that's strong enough to stand, to be sturdy, even though it's 40 amas tall, you would have to make it more than an amma thick. And we were unable to make it more than an amma thick because all of the dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash, beginning with Bayis Rishon, right, was given to David and to Shlomo al pi Ruach HaKodesh, al pi Nevuah. Here we're using general Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah and the general categorization that this was mamish divinely inspired. And we know that, let's go east-west, the east-west dimension of the Kodesh has to be 40 amas, and the east-west size, open space of the Kodesh Kodshim has to be 20 amas. And there was this one additional amma for you to build a wall in between one and the other. But if you're going to build a wall taller, you'll have to make it thicker. It's going to eat up either from the Kodesh or from the Kodesh Kodshim or from both, and that's something that we may not do. So they needed to put up a curtain. Now, we can't eat up the space, but why not put up one curtain? And that will be one of the topics we'll be learning right now. Even though it would mean, well, you can make a curtain that's an amma thick. Now, when there was a wall there, Bizman Bayis Rishon, and the opening of the wall was always in the northern part of the Heichal, many hold that there was also a curtain that would disallow someone in the Heichal to physically see into the Kodesh Kodshim. Even though if you would look in from that angle, unless you come really up close, you would not see the Aron HaKodesh, because the Aron HaKodesh was placed exactly in the center. Nevertheless, for tznius, some hold that there was a curtain closing it off. Similarly, when those Tanoim who hold that Bizman Bayesheni there was also only one curtain whose big opening was on the northern side, there are some that hold there was something else that was hung that would obstruct the vision, and others hold that no. They hold that it was mamish visible. That means that there was an opening. I don't know how wide the opening was, but if someone were to stand mamish on their northern wall, then they would be able to see into the Kodesh Kodshim, and all of that will be negate to our sugya. So let's come back into our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is following beginning with the Tana that holds, but Bizman Bayesheni there were 2 curtains. So he would come lebein shtei aporoiches. Hamavdila is bein Kodesh ubein Kodesh Kodshim. And now the Mishnah adds another detail that how much space did you have in between these 2 curtains? 1 amma. However, Rabbi Yosi Omer that loy hoisa sham ela pareiches achas. Wow, this is really amazing. We're not that far away from Bizman Bayesheni, and we have a machlokes tanoim begashmius regarding the structure of Bayesheni. This is not the first time. If you remember, we also had that big machlokes between the Chachamim and Eliezer ben Yaakov. Right? Was there an amos step separating the Ezras Yisrael and Ezras Kohanim? Remember that whole topic? Whether the Kohen who would shech the paraduma, whether he can see through the open door in the Mizrach, the Koisel HaMizrachi from Harabayis, or whether no, they would have to build the lintel and no wall over the lintel because you would have to see over it. Then another machlokes. Rabbi Yosi Omer, this is the new picture now on the screen. That lo ha'isasham ela paroiches achas bulvad. And why is that shenemar? Now the shenemar is not a pasuk regarding Bayesheni. The shenemar is a pasuk that we have in the Chumash. That means regarding the Mishkan. V'hivdila ha'paroiches lashon yachid lochem bein hakodesh ubein kodesh hakodoshim. So asks the Gemara, hold on. Rabbi Yosi has a pasuk shapir ka'amalahu Rabbi Yosi l'Rabbanan. One paroiches answers the Gemara explaining the Tanakama, which is Das Rabim, the Chachamim, Rabbanon Amri Loch, Hanamili, Bamishkan, but Bamigdash Sheni, and again that's the step that Migdash Rishon that was designed by God given over to David and to Shlomo, the space that needed to be used in between Kodesh and Kodesh Kachim was a Amma space, because if you would have less than an Amma, then the dimension of the Kodesh would be more than 40 Ammas. The dimensions of the Kodesh Kachim would be more than 20 Ammas. We're speaking east-west, west-east. And for it to be exactly with the measurements that God said, there was one Amma meant for the division. And that, there was a wall built. And that wall is called, right, the Amma Terak. Now just to speak out, that Rashi writes that the word Terak means within, and the word sin means without. And the reason why they call it Amma Teraksin is because the Chachamim had a doubt. How do you define that Amma? Does that Amma have the status of the Kodesh, or does that Amma have the status of the Kodesh Kachim? Not long ago we spoke out the same question regarding Kedushas Harabayis begins, Machna Leviyah begins beyond the walls that separate the Harabayis. But what about the wall itself? And as we spoke out, that's really Negei Lamaisa, because someone who only has Tumas Keri may not go on Harabayis. Can you put your finger in the Koisel? Can you even touch the Koisel? In other words, we have this question, it's clear, from one side, eastern side of the wall, Kodesh. Western side of this wall, Kodesh Kachim. What's the status of the wall? We didn't know, so that's one of the reasons why.
Rabbi, if they had a wall in the Bayis Rishon, why not just build a wall in the Bayis Sheni?
So
out of the space matter.
I explained that because since, well, first of all, the status of the wall, we didn't know what it is. There's no practical nafkamina. The Bayis Rishon ceiling was 30 amas tall. So we only had one amma to build a wall, which is all we needed to build a sturdy wall that can go up 30 amas. The moment you went taller, you needed more space, and you were not allowed to eat up space from anywhere. Oh, now, Aval Migdasheni, since that's just for, so Tanakh either means it's just a lashon used to connote that we had a suffix, whether it had the kedusha of within or of without. And Tosfos writes that the word terak means to close, and sin from Sinai. Since we had the Luchais Abriz, so it was the wall that closed, just a lashon of the wall. In the Mikdash Sheni, we certainly did not have the wall. There wasn't the Amatarax. Uba Mikdash Rishon, only there hu da Havai, and now the Gemara is speaking out. V'istapkalol Rabbanon bekedushasei. That Amma space, ikelafnim, ikelachutz. Now this is very significant, because since Bisman Bayis Sheni, we were unable to build a wall, so if you're going to only have one paroiches, we would not know where to put it. We would not know where to put it, because if, let's say, you're going to put it in the innermost part, but if the Amma space itself also has Kedushas Kodesh Kachim, then it's a terrible thing. Then someone is going to be walking up only to the paroiches, but they're going to be really entering the Kodesh HaKachim. That's unacceptable. Likewise, in reverse, why did you say just put the paroiches closer to the Heichel, closer to the east? That's also not okay, because then you can be thinking you're standing in the Kodesh Kachim, and you're not. On top of that, the paroiches' purpose was to be by the boundary separating bein Kodesh l'Kodesh Kachim. Forget about you walking there. If the paroiches is not on the boundary, then the paroiches is not placed where it has to be. It's not bein Kodesh l'Kodesh Kachim. So the solution is, this is all the Tanakama, the Chachamim, that they made two curtains. So one was, so to say, where the easternmost part of the Amataraxim was Bisman Bayis Rishon. The other curtain was where the westernmost part of the one wall was Bisman Bayis Rishon. And yes, there was an area for the Kohen Gadol to walk in between it. This also resolved, according to the Shita, that no one was able to see from the Heichel inside the Kodesh Kachim, or vice versa. L'kula alma, the opening of the innermost curtain was to the north, and therefore, if there were two curtains, according to the Shita, the opening of the outer curtain was towards the south. And based on all of this, we'll better appreciate now the three-way machlokes Tanoim. Tan Rabbanan, we learned what was the path that the Kohen Gadol took. That bein hamizbeach lemenoida hoya ma'alach divrei Rabbi Yehuda. He would walk on the southern side of the Heichel, or when he would walk in, again I'm just going, since he's going from east to west, on the left side. But very interestingly, he didn't walk in and just walk straight all the way on the southern wall. And the Gemara is going to ask, why not? So as you would see, he would walk, so to say, in between the Mizbeach and the Menorah. Then he would have to make a sharp left. And he would go all the way to the opening of the first curtain, which is on the southern side. And then he would walk through. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Meir says, no, he would go to the right. And here again, not mamish on the right, not like this picture, that's the wrong picture. Bein shulchan lemizbeach. Oh, that's the picture. He would again walk on the northern side, but not all the way by the northern wall. Here the picture already describes the explanation for it. All right? So he would walk in between the shulchan and the mizbeach, or in between the mizbeach and the shulchan, in the lashon shulchan mizbeach, and then he would make a sharp right, allowing him to enter, as the picture already is telling you that Rabbi Meir opines, like Rabbi Yossi, that there was only one curtain, even Bizman Bayesheni. And Lekula Alma, the curtain that goes into the Holy of Holies, had its opening on the right, on the north. However, now this third shita holds, similar to Rav Meir, that he went in the northern side of the Heichel. But he didn't make this convoluted path. No, he went like that, this picture. Ben Shulchan L'Kois Amachayim. It's the easiest way to walk. And how many things did we already learn? Like, for example, he shechted the par, where ben ulam lamizbeach. Why didn't you shecht it closer to the Ezras Yisrael? Achul shad kohen gadol. Don't forget, we're trying to make everything simpler, so that's certainly the simplest path. Now the Gemara explains, let's go backwards. Man yesh oimrim, Rabbi Chizda says, I'll explain to you the yesh oimrim. The yesh oimrim is Rabbi Yossi, because if the yesh oimrim would have been the Tanach or the Chachamim of our Mishnah, it wouldn't work. According to the Tanach that there was a double curtain, well, the first opening is dafke to the left on the Darain. Since he is following the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, there was only one curtain, and therefore Lekula Alma, that innermost curtain, or only one curtain, had the opening to the north. So first of all, he's going on the northern part. The Amar Pischa B'Tzafin Koi. And Rabbi Yehuda, the first time of this Braisa that says that he walked in the south, it's also clear. He follows the sheet of our Chachamim. There was a double curtain, and the first curtain's opening, if there was a double curtain, was in the south. Again, there's no debate about that. So he walked already on the southern side. The question is, how do you explain Rabbi Meir? But Rabbi Meir, however, come on, Sviralei. Ike Rabbi Yehuda Sviralei. Then nail ke Rabbi Yehuda. Walk all the way like Rabbi Yehuda. Ike Rabbi Sviralei. Nail ke Rabbi Yossi. Answers the Gemara L'Olam. Even Rabbi Meir holds like Rabbi Yossi. Not like the Chachamim of our Mishnah. There was only one opening. There was only one opening, and the one opening is in the north. However, like we explained, V'amalach. Now, even though that our Mishnah is generally recording by Yesheni, but this is in reference to what happened Bizman Bayis Rishon. Amalach, since the 10 additional shulchanos that King Solomon introduced into the Heichel, by God's instruction, and all of the shulchanos, my friends, have to be placed in the northern half. Right? Shulchan is betzafain. If, and according to those who hold that the direction of the shulchanis, guys, we learned about this, is not east-west, not east-west, but it was north-south. So you'll chop already that if it was north-south, there could not have been one row of shulchanis. You needed to break it into two rows to guarantee that all of them are in the right side, are in the northern side. And even by dividing them into two columns, for them to still be in the right side, they have to be mamish put all the way to the wall. So you could not have walked on the wall because they were blocked by shulchanos. Shulchanos, safin darim monachim, not mizrach ma'arev. We're speaking here about the extra shulchanos, and therefore, umafsik alei shulchan, there was a hefsik, there was an obstruction created twice by both of these rows, and v'loi misayalei, all the way on the northern wall. So you needed to walk in. Walk over. It has to be north. You want to keep to the northern half because ultimately you will enter from the north. Don't walk if more than you need. And I think it's not only about chulshah the kohen gadol, it's that also. It's, you're not allowed to enter for no purpose. You can't just wander in there. You have to walk, the quickest path. When you call a person now to an Aliyah, by the way, it's the same halacha. Even though the general rule is that kol pina she'ata poina lo yeh el derech yamin, So if you walking to the bima, going to the right or to the left is exactly the same, then you should always walk derech yamin. But if closer is walking to the left, then you walk to the left. Because you don't wander. You're being called to go to the Torah. Go the quickest route possible. He's taking the quickest route possible, even if there's no chulsha. The question is simply where the opening is and how the shulchanos are. Or v'iba yiseimam lo'ilam. Rabbi Meir will hold that the 10 additional shulchanos, their layout was not north south, but it was east west. And therefore, theoretically, you could have walked on the northern wall. And he also holds there was only one curtain. The opening was in the northern wall. So isn't that the quickest route? Yes, but precisely that is the problem. Because since there is a greater gilui of the Shechina in the Kodesh Kachim, so it's not proper decorum, lav oirach aradaf nun beis lemeya lahedya, to walk directly towards the entrance. And this is what we mentioned when we began the Mishnah, that you should know there is a machloikas here in the Rishonim. Listen, if there were two curtains, there's nothing to talk about. No one can see from one environment into the other. If there was only one curtain, and bisman bayis rishon, that lekula alma, there was the amatraxen, and that was opened in the northern side. Was the taka opened? Some Rishonim hold that they hung a curtain there. They put some sort of division to obstruct vision. Others hold not. That if someone taka were to walk all the way on the northern side, they would mamish be able to see in. Now they wouldn't see any kli kodesh unless they went all the way to the end of the heichal and they would like peek in. Then they would see the badim, maybe they would even see the aron hakodesh. No one would do that, that's wrong. But and this Gemara can be read according to anyone. Avada, if it was opened, it's not considered sneezdik because then you can gaze inside. And Rashi clearly subscribes to that opinion. We don't want you to see inside. And even, you're going inside, it doesn't matter. You're still in the heichal, you should not be able to see inside. Even if there was some sort of curtain, still it's not considered as a modest. You're going straight into the holiest place in the world. Fakert, come from an angle. The Rabbi Yossi Amalach. Now, what about Rabbi Yossi? So Rabbi Yossi Amalach, Chavivin Yisrael, Shelo Yitzrichon HaKosev L'Shliach. That since Yidden are beloved, ve'haraya, they don't need a shliach. We'll read the Rabbeinu Hanan, we have time. That's why on Yom Kippur, yes, walk straight on the northern wall. Let's read the Rabbeinu Hanan. It's right here in the left third line from the top. Rabbi Yossi Amalach Chavivin Yisrael, that they don't need Shelo Yitzrichon HaKosev L'Zeh. He has an old different version. Haloi, Tira, this is how the Rabbeinu Hanan understands our Gemara. Ki b'chol hashana hitzrichu hakosev l'koyin b'makoim shliach. When the Kohen Gadol walked around, there needed to be a proverbial announcer. Shliach, the Kohen Gadol is coming. That wasn't to give honor to the Kohen Gadol. That was to give honor to the Shechina. It's like when you live in your home, it's more respectful for you to be informed prior to someone entering your house. Right, today we have a bell. The purpose of even if the door is open and you're told the guest, walk in, ring the bell, knock on the door. The bell is like a shlich, it's like an announcer. So the Rabbeinu Hananel is explaining, by the fact that the Kohen Gadol had those rimonim, right, on the me'il, the reason for that is not for people to know that the Kohen Gadol is coming. It's ke'ilu, you are announcing to the Shechina that someone is coming into you, the Shechina space. The fact that on Yom Kippur says that Rabbeinu Hananel, he didn't go with those, when he went with the Big Day Love and he didn't have those rimonim bells, that means that God is so intimate on Yom Kippur with the Yidden being represented by the Kohen Gadol, mamish, come right in. So fakert, coming right in also means walking straight on the northern wall. Now, just to remember that we also spoke about that the ladle, the kaf, according to one interpretation, did have a ring, and the ring did make noise. Remember that funny word. If according to that understanding, then the Rabbeinu Hananel's whole explanation doesn't fit. But anyways, Rabbeinu Hananel certainly did not subscribe to that, and he held that when the Kohen Gadol walked around, even with the big day lovin, no noise was made. There was no instrument. There was no keli that made any noise. Fakir. That's the pshat that shelo yitzrichon hakosev l'shliach, and that's mamash gavaldik. When you're really close to someone, you tell a person, come right in. Don't even knock. Walk on the northern wall. Now comes a question. The question is that the shita of the Tana Rebbe Yehuda that says he walked on the southern wall. He, like we said, subscribes to the Chachamim of our Mishnah that there were two curtains. Now we have a Gavaldik Kasha. What's the great question? If there were two curtains, this concept of not walking all the way on the wall because it's disrespectful is not shaykh because there was a double curtain. You can never forget the southern side was b'chlal not the entrance. Not only was there a obstruction by the inner pareiches, but when you went in between the two pareiches and you had to walk all the way from south to east. There was no obstruction in the Heichal disallowing the Kohen Gadol to walk all the way on the southern wall. So now the question is, the Rabbi Yehuda nami neil be'menoira l'koisel. Why do you have to walk be'mizbeach l'menoira? Answers the Gemara, and guys, we just learned that there was 2.5 amas between the shulchan and the koisel, the one shulchan that was needed for the kahanim to be able to replace the lechem apanims and to be symmetric. We learned, even though that you went up to the lamps only by the stairs, if you went up to the lamps because they were part of the menorah from one side, but just the menorah should be symmetric to the shulchan. It was also 2.5 amas away from the southern wall. That's enough, plenty of space for the Kohen Gadol to walk through. Answers the Gemara that mashcherei money, that if he would walk by the wall, his money, his begadim would become shachar, they would become blackened, because fire was burning there the whole time. So in order for him to stay away from the wall, if he would touch the wall, there would be some soot, if that's the word. So go in between the mizbech and the menorah, and how beautiful, al pi Chasidus, you think about it, that south, menorah, chesed is white, right? Gavura is red. Oh, but the closer you get to God, the more gavura is good for you, is expected of you. When you're already entering the Kodesh Kachim, excess chesed in that place, not enough gavura is actually black. Got to go a little bit at least to the north, a little bit more discipline. Right? And when Mashiach will come, and there'll be a greater gilui of godliness, Dafka halacha will be like Beis Hillel. Chavra, to be continued. I'm sorry, halacha kipei Shammai. Thank you. Wow, what an ending.